Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Representative Gary Hopper, and this is the Honorable Eric Eastman.
I'm still trying to convince the general public that prefix belongs in front of my name, but
whatever,
I don't know if I pulled it off yet.
You know, fake it till you make it.
It's
Am I serious?
Story of my life. Welcome, folks.
Welcome. Okay, so this is. Jeez, I freaking screwed up. Oh, that's it.
We're off to a running start. As you can plainly see.
We're really good at this.
Ladies and gentlemen,
we're professional.
Rehearsed this
all day.
Rehearsed this all day. If you consider the last 10 seconds all day.
I met Walter Mutti.
That's good. It's close enough.
Mutti. Okay. I met Walter at my friend's. It wasn't a funeral service, memorial service, down in Stowe, Massachusetts. Was that like 2 months ago?
Yeah, how about that?
About 2 months ago. A longtime friend, high school friend, passed away, and you did the service, and I got to talking to you, and it was just, your story is so compelling and so awesome. I mean, as a Christian myself, I try to do things for God, but they're pitiful comparatively speaking.
You're doing what you can.
No, I don't even do that much.
It's not wise to compare ourselves, right?
No, I know. Well, God, that's just it. God's has different people in different places doing different things, and it's.
I couldn't handle working in the government and all
neither,
that.
Yeah.
Most of the people working in the government can't handle working in the government.
Yeah, but anyway, so you were telling me when I was down south in Massachusetts that you're a pastor. And you spent 14 years in the Amazon jungle, and that is so cool. I just can't imagine what that. So tell us, because I can't imagine. So you're gonna have to tell me.
Okay, there's a little bit of correction there.
It's.
I spent 14 years, 20 years with New Tribes Mission.
Okay, what is New Tribes Mission?
New Tribes Mission is a Christian mission organization that works with tribal. Unreached people groups throughout the globe. Any group of people that does not have the Word of God in their language, New Tribes, which is now called Ethnos 360.
Ethnos 360, okay.
They just recently changed their name. We do Bible translation and church planting among the unreached people groups throughout the world. Okay?
Right.
Jane and I went with New Tribes Mission in 1992, and we headed to Venezuela, South America. Because in Venezuela alone there are 38 different ethnic groups, different language groups in Venezuela alone.
Now, are they all the same lineage, or just different? Like same lineage but different tribes? Like, in other words, they're all
completely different
Native
languages and different groups of people.
Literally different cultures.
Literally different cultures, yes. But because they're in the same jungle, they have basic similarities.
Sure.
But their languages are completely different.
Really?
And just because you know one language, and I'll just name a few, the Maikiritare Indians, the people that Jane and I lived with, they have one language, which is called the Yekwana language. The Paimon, the Piaroa, the Yanomami, the Pume, the Mako. Those are just a handful of the 38 different linguistic groups there in Venezuela.
And they're all totally different.
And we need to do a Bible translation in each of those languages.
Wow.
What life's work.
It's phenomenal.
And this is just Venezuela. This is the northern
This is just
end
one country
of an entire continent.
Right.
Our neighbors in South America. And how many North Americans know this? What you've just shared,
yeah,
or even consider the fact that there's so many cultures.
Yeah,
That's
and then you have Brazil. The Amazon jungle itself, the Amazon territory, is about the size of the United States.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a huge piece of property, and there's many people living secluded in the jungle. Some people have not even been reached yet. The Chitichano Indians, for example, the last known tribe in Venezuela that I had the privilege of doing a contact work with them. Jamie Miller, a young man who's very good, gifted linguistically, and myself, we had an opportunity to do a survey trip deep into the Amazon jungle towards the Brazilian border on the La Paragua River system to locate the Chirichano Indians. That was a 3-day trip, and it was fascinating because you never knew what was going to happen. You know, it's an adrenaline rush, I will tell you.
Now, you going upriver, or
We went upriver towards Brazil, yes.
Okay.
And so that was an incredible opportunity to meet these people and to try and determine what language group they're from. We copy their language down on cassette players and then send the tapes out to both New Tribes Mission headquarters in Florida and Wycliffe Bible translators in Texas. And they listen and they send that language out to other groups of people to see if anybody could understand any of it or how they break it down. I don't know. That's above my pay grade.
Right,
They
right,
do all
right.
That stuff. I was doing the ground level stuff,
grunt
just
work.
collecting the language.
Right.
Fascinating.
What
Fascinating.
fun.
Yeah, it was fun. A lot of fun.
Now, were you able to get proficient in any of the languages that you studied or collected?
No, the national language of Venezuela is Spanish.
Sure.
So I had to first learn Spanish before going into the tribe. Then on the river system, Spanish is your trade language.
Mm-hmm.
So if you meet up with different tribal people, you use Spanish as a way to communicate. Jane and I were not in the tribe with the Maikititari long enough in order to be proficient in the language.
Right.
Okay. As soon as we moved in, our co-workers, the Cochrans, Matt and Rosie Cochran, Rosie got very, very sick with malaria, almost to the point of death. And they had to emergency flight her out with her husband Matt and the kids. So Jane and I were left alone. And so we were trying to figure out tribal life alone, and that was very interesting. And so we lived 4.5 years there like that.
Wow.
Those
Were the
conditions.
various tribal members receptive to you? Were
It
they
depends on
embracing
the
of your
group.
efforts?
Different groups have different personalities. You've heard of the Yanomamo Indians, or the Yanomami Indians, they call them. They're called the fierce people. They're very, very aggressive. They're fearful of outsiders. So when you walk into their village, you are a threat to them. And they'll stand there as you're walking towards their village with their bows and arrows at full draw, just following you along. And you're just thinking the whole time, man, I just hope he don't let go of that thing because that's going to hurt. But they're very aggressive. They like to be in your face. They do have a male, ego thing where it's face to face and I wanna show you,
Testosterone.
who's king of the jungle basically.
Sure.
And so you can play with that. You can use it to your advantage. But the idea is we're there to love these people to Christ.
Right.
That's the bottom line. The bottom line is to get the Word of God into their language, and that's not an easy task. It takes a lot of people. A lot of people. You have the missionaries are actually doing the work, and then within that group, you have the Bible translators. You have the linguistic analysis translators, the ones who are actually breaking the language down and building a language system for them. Okay, because their language has never been written down, so they have no alphabet. So we have to build a phonemic system for them. And then you have to assign phonetic symbols to their sounds. So if for instance, we don't have in our language,
Right.
so how would you write that down if you hear that sound, right?
Right.
You have to assign a phonemic symbol to that. In our language, if I said to you, went to mewa, I'm breathing through my nose. It's a nasalized vowel. And how do you write that down if we don't have that in the English language? Which means, by the way, I'm hungry.
Went to mewa.
Went to
That's one. I got to learn that
We're going
one.
to do it through the nose. Hope you don't have a cold.
Oh, I got to teach it to my
Yeah, right,
grandson.
exactly.
He's perpetually hungry.
So, yeah, it's a fascinating life. And
Doesn't somebody have to be on the ground to, like when you said, I don't know, I can't repeat what you just said, but the phrase for "I'm hungry," doesn't somebody have to be on the ground to finally understand what that is before the linguist gets involved? Because the linguist, you just send them a bunch of words. I can't imagine how they can correlate that to actual meaning without some sort of, picking up a spear and then calling it something or.
Right, and that's really how it starts. You go into a village. When I had the opportunity to go into the Chirichano work and see these people for the first time, we would grab things and say, ¿Cómo se dice eso en su lengua? How would you say this in your language? And because they would have a little bit of Spanish, but in this case, they had a little bit more Portuguese than they did Spanish.
Oh,
because they
okay.
were closer to the Brazilian border.
Right.
Then they say, this is how I say that in their language.
Okay.
The linguists have the ability to start breaking down sentences to know where words start, prefixes and suffixes and all that stuff
Right.
that goes with breaking a language down. But people like myself, who am clueless when it comes to, I don't even know what a noun and verb is in English.
Right.
Never mind, makiritare. God has gifted me in different areas. I did all the medical work and the dental work there in the tribe. I was the village helper.
Right.
And I made sure that the linguists, the Cochrane family, that they were up and doing their job, because that's what they were gifted in. I was more gifted in the hands-on stuff.
Right.
And I wasn't that good at it. I'm just saying, you know how physicians say they practice medicine?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all I was doing, practicing medicine.
Practicing. Eventually we'll get it down.
But I learned to do,
Plus, in that environment, you don't have to worry about lawsuits.
that's right.
Right.
And
that's
I
the
did
main thing.
complete dental, I pulled thousands of teeth. I sewed up everything from bullet wounds to reattached severed finger to
Really?
everything.
Well, access to anesthesia must be an interesting trick.
Well, we could get, that's the nice thing about Venezuela, is that you could get all the pharmaceuticals over the counter. So we would order
really?
in, lidocaine for
Sure.
anesthesia.
Sure.
And I learned to do all the dental blocks so that I could give a shot and they wouldn't feel the pain. I could pull their teeth, because they did it with a nail or a file, and they would hold the person down on the ground and they would dig the teeth out. Well, there's no medicine. We're in the middle of the jungle. And they had no way of removing rotted teeth. And so they would say they'd have pain, and I'd look in, it would just be a white spot where the tooth used to be, and I would have to go in and levitate the root out of the bone. But before I did that, I gave Novocaine. They loved it. They would go to the village hitting themselves, because they've never felt it before, having no pain.
Right.
Very, very high pain tolerance.
Wow.
So that was my job: the medical, the dental, the social welfare of the village.
And how much training medical did you have to go through to just?
I had no training at all. But just
Excellent,
the fact that
excellent.
we grew up in the United States, you had a lot of training.
Why?
Well, just growing up here and learning about infection, learning about diseases.
Right.
Okay.
You and I
okay.
know those things.
Right. That's
They
true.
don't.
And we also know preventive, what to us is
Exactly.
everyday knowledge, for them would be a big deal.
And so they know nothing about the malaria bug, the parasite. So we would explain to them it's a parasite. It's from being bit by a mosquito, and they would say no. It's because it's a curse from another village, or it's from a spiritual being, and this is why I'm sick, or my son's sick, or whatever. And after a lot of teaching, then you can start seeing their eyes start to open up about the parasite of malaria.
Right.
And it was, they would die continually because of malaria prior to us being there. And us bringing in the medicines and the ability to read the blood slides. My wife and I learned to read the blood slides to determine what type of malaria it was, and then give the proper medication.
You got an immense amount of training that you would have to pay tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to med school here to get this kind of training. And
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
willing to go into the field and
And learn right there, on-the-job training. Yeah,
On the
it's
job
fascinating. Pulling, growing up, I don't want to take up all the time, but
No, it's okay.
growing up on TV.
We can always do 2 shows, buddy.
Yeah, growing up on
That's
TV,
true.
you see, an old Western, a guy gets shot in the shoulder, and the doc is gives him a bottle of whiskey, bites on the cork, and,
Yeah.
he reaches in with the tweezers and pulls a lead slug out and throws it in a plate, and you hear the clink, and,
Yeah.
well, when it really happens, you think, okay, I'll just do what I saw on TV. But then you go in with the long tweezers and you can't grab it because it's slippery and there's tissue all wrapped around the lead slug, and you're trying to pull it out, and the guy is agonizing in pain, and you're sweating, and you're trying to pull this lead slug out, and finally you get it out to 10 minutes of just sweat. It feels like 10 minutes, probably only a minute, and you throw it in a plate and you say, okay, I'm done. I'll leave the rest of them in there for now. But yeah, those are things you learn as you're there.
Wow.
But our coworkers, the Cochrans,
how-
they helped a lot in helping us get settled in. They had already been there a couple of years,
Sure.
and so when we moved in, we were like the greenhorns, and they're like, "Let us show you what to do," and they were just tremendous. Our coworkers, I can't praise them enough.
How often would there be lead bullets in people?
Oh, not too often. I only did 1 or 2.
1 or 2?
Yeah, there were cuts, machete cuts, and wounds. Those are the worst.
Yeah.
One- one-
Profuse bleeding, and you got to suture the thing up as fast
Yeah,
as you
that's the
can.
tough ones. Especially if they cut an artery. I had one of those, and that was really, really hard because you can't see anything, and you're yelling for gauze, and you're trying to clean up the mess and cut off the circulation in order to sew it up.
Sure.
But
Wow.
it's scary, but at the same time, these people die. They'll die if you don't. And that's why we're there. We're not only there to give them the gospel, yes, we are, but in order to help them physically. When Jesus Christ came to this world, he touched thousands and healed them.
Yes.
And we as Christians are called to do the same. To touch others, to heal them, to visit those who are in the hospital, to visit those who are in prison, to minister to those who are sick, to clothe the naked, to feed the hungry, right?
Right.
That's what we're called to do.
It's true.
So as Christians,
Before we run out of time, because we're not even close, but I just love the story. Tell them about your what the witch doctor and the chief said about you to your wife.
the one where he wanted her, you mean?
No, not
one?
that. I didn't know
Oh, not
about that one. No, I didn't.
Probably shouldn't say that one on
No,
air.
probably not. No, the other one about how incompetent you
Oh,
were.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it really shows you what we're like there in their world. So we're living there, and Jane, my wife, the most incredible woman in the world, she would go out and dote on the witch doctor and the chief and the captain. We had 3 men who lead the village.
Right.
And every morning, pretty much, they would come to our porch, and she would go out and give them brownies or give them a sweet and a cup of coffee, and they just loved her to death. She would dote on them. Oh, grandfather, how are you doing today? And she would be practicing her language with them, so one day she goes out, and they're like, oh, poor Jane, and she's like, why, grandfather? Why poor Jane? Why do you say that? He says, well, because you're married to him. And of course, Jane is starting to laugh now, And she says, well, what's wrong with Walter? Well, he's so stupid. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know the house is falling down around you because the poles are rotted. He doesn't know how to paddle a canoe. He doesn't know how to clear a garden. He doesn't know how to hunt. He doesn't know how to fish. Let me ask you a question. How did you survive in your village before you came here? Because in their hearts and minds, our village was like their village.
We just have a different village in a different place.
Right,
Same
Because
problems.
they've never seen the outside world. They've
Wow.
never seen buildings and cars, and we would try to explain to them the buildings that we live on top of each other. And they're like thinking a mud hut on top of another mud hut with ladders.
Which doesn't
and
make
such.
any sense.
That's
Yeah.
their frame of reference. They don't know what city is.
Right. And you can't explain what a car is. You can't explain any of those things.
That's right.
You say it's a metal box. Well, what's a metal box? And it has wheels. What are wheels? It has a motor and gasoline. None of those things mean anything to these people.
Right,
Very,
right.
very primitive. One night as I was watching a satellite go over, because the Amazonian sky is the most incredible, most beautiful sky, black, you can see everything. And,
Right.
and I saw this little red dot going over the jungle, and I said to a young Makiritari lady, I said, that's a satellite that is flying over. And a satellite is a big machine with solar panels on it. And
Wow, you're totally lost, right?
and-
You're already
and-
done.
And I'm thinking, oh no, I can't go any further. And she's listening, and I said, and it has solar panels on it, and we can speak, and it goes to that machine and then down to other parts of the world, to other villages.
So we can hear our voice far
And
away.
she says, Walter, it's a little red dot. And I said, no, it's as big as our hut, and it has solar panels on it, just like our hut, because we had solar panels on our hut.
Sure.
She said, Walter, it's a little red dot. And then she goes into her house, and I could hear her whole family laughing and laughing. Walter's so stupid. You know, you have to learn to laugh.
You didn't
at
have
yourself.
very good reputation.
No, I didn't.
No,
I
no,
didn't.
no.
I wasn't the most successful missionary in the jungle.
Wow, no, that's awesome.
But
That
they
is-
liked you.
Yeah, some people did. Yes,
Some
Okay.
they liked my wife. I think that's why they kept me alive.
That's why they didn't kill you.
Yeah.
The story you just told reminded me of those couple of films, The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you've
The
seen
Coke
them.
bottle.
The Coke bottle, yeah. That was, I think, Africa, but it's the same idea.
Yep.
They just had no way to relate to.
Yeah, and what's funny about that is pilot Eric, a very good friend of mine who's a pilot from Nebraska. We were drinking Coke as we were flying out over to the jungle to my tribal village, and Eric opens his plane window and throws
Throws the Coke
bottle out.
bottle.
I'm like, oh yeah, I wish I had a video of
Here you
that.
go, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, tell what's
amazing.
the drum? You brought stuff with you.
I did. This is a Makiritare drum, and it has, I believe, pigskin on one side and monkey on the other. There's probably only a couple of these in the world anymore because it's very old. But the Makiritare make this for their rituals, and I don't fully understand that culture. We weren't in there long enough to understand everything, but what I did understand or know that they would play this, and they would just do this 24/7 while they were building a house, and it was in order to protect the house from any evil
Spirits.
Sure.
and it would drive you insane. This just constant, 24/7, just keep going.
No variation to the rhythm.
Nothing.
Like
Nothing.
a metronome.
And so, you know, after a day or two of that, you thought, okay, I can see why the cowboys killed all the Indians, back in the old days. Because they were going crazy, they couldn't stand the noise
Having a mental.
over and over.
Are those
Wow.
the original tribal markings that we see on
These
the skin
are,
there?
this is from the Makiritare Indians.
Do you know if the symbol means anything, or is it just decoration?
They're just decorations, most likely. They probably do have symbol
So that is
meanings.
hand painted by a
It is.
Makiritare
They use
drum maker.
a sap from a tree. They pull a bark off a tree and the sap on the back of it, and then they mix it with charcoal from the fire for the black, and then the red they get from a berry. They mix it, and then it sticks to anything.
Oh wow!
Wow, that
Do
is
they do
super cool.
tattoos on themselves and stuff like that, or how do
They-
they adorn themselves?
They do. They paint themselves with this, and it stays on for quite some time. And after a while, it becomes very attractive. I mean, it's their makeup.
Right, right.
And,
Sure.
and it really looks cute on them, on the girls, and the guys, do their warrior paint on and
Right.
to look like years of warriors. So that's our drum. I think there's, like I said, there's only a few of these left in the world, and I have 2 of them I brought home, which I'm very thankful to have them and pass them on to my kids, who grew up there, by the way. My 4 boys grew up in the Amazon jungle. And
How many
so-
American kids can say that?
Yeah,
Whoa,
yeah.
wow.
There's quite a contingent of North American and European MKs, we call them, missionary kids. They grew
Oh,
up there in
okay.
the jungle. And this here is a Makiritare. It's a man's dress. He would wear this on his neck with the colors going down his back. And against the brown skin, it looks very nice, very attractive. That's a male tie, like you wear yours on the
Right,
front.
right.
They wear theirs on the back. This is for hand-to-hand combat. They normally carve these in order to get the eyes the distance between the eyes. It's for fighting hand-to-hand combat.
That's wow.
And then this is, I think the proper name is a yadiwadu. And they use this for also hand-to-hand combat, but also for, I've seen them use them for, beating an animal to death when they corner an animal or, an alligator. It's pretty heavy. It's strong wood.
It's all one piece of wood?
It is. It's amazing how they cut it out of trees. And
Paul, can you zoom in on that? That is cotton picking beautiful.
And those are parrot feathers.
Those are parrot feathers?
Yeah, from the parrots, different parrots.
I guess you can't.
They are.
Toucan, the green ones.
Yeah, I can. Hold on. They're right there.
All right. He can. Willie is a completely different question.
Yeah, tip it this way a little bit.
I'm trying to get the light on it so you can see
There's a beautiful design here that's
Beautiful,
carved
yeah.
into the wood, actually.
is
I don't know if
that
you
is
can
that
see
enough light on that, or is trying to see which
Yeah, there's a
one?
lot of good lighting on that.
Now,
Is
all
that-
of these are
Lift it up a
tribal.
little bit so that there's a graphic. There you go.
So
Okay.
these are definitely tribal designs and handmade items from start to finish.
Yes.
Am I
Oh,
correct?
yeah. Yeah, these are all handmade.
Thank you.
Yeah, with a machete and
That's awesome. I was gonna guess a pole. I thought it was like combination like paddle and
they make beautiful paddles and beautiful canoes. And Mike and Atati were canoe makers.
Mhm.
They would cut a tree down and then make it's a long, very, very arduous task of making a canoe out of a tree. It took sometimes months. It was amazing to watch.
Don't they have to burn
They
it out
would.
to hollow
They
it out?
would carve it out a little bit, then turn it upside down, build a long fire underneath it,
Right.
and burn it out, and then turn it back over, carve it out, and then they would drill holes all through it. Like here on the drum, there's a hole drilled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that hole is to determine the thickness of the wood, because as they're hollowing out the wood,
They don't wanna get
canoe,
too
they don't want
thin.
to get too thin.
Sure.
And they know the exact thickness that they should be at. So they would drill these holes all through the bottom of the boat to know the thickness. They would turn it back over, burn it out some more, turn it back over, carve out some more. And they had adze that they would use to do that. And they're very, very heavy. We're talking 1,000, 2,000 pounds boats. And beautiful, beautiful boats. And they would trade them.
How thick is the when they're done the canoe? How thick is the wall thickness?
It's
on
about
it?
an inch to inch and a half, depending
Oh,
on the
gosh.
size. They'd be up to like 15 meters.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
carry
these
a
things
lot
are
of
30 feet.
people.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some of them.
Or if they go on a hunt, they've got to carry back their prey,
Yeah,
right? You know,
yeah.
wild boar
Yeah,
or whatever.
exactly. Yeah, the hunts were a lot of fun. You go for 2 or 3 days out hunting in the middle of the jungle and living with the Indians is fascinating.
Oh,
It is.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Well, there's no grocery stores. I mean,
It's
a
yeah,
totally
it's
different
just.
life.
I mean, the only thing the Indians know what to do. That's their life. The only thing I could do that the Indians couldn't. This is the only thing. I go on record for this. All right, is I could shoot a bird out of the air.
With what?
A shotgun.
With a shot, okay.
Okay, because growing up here in the United States, my dad gave me a shotgun when I was a little boy, and we learned to do duck hunting and trap shooting and skeet
Sure.
skeet. And so the Indians, because a gun is so precious and the shells are almost impossible to come by, they would never shoot anything that they didn't know they would absolutely get. And
Right.
so the one thing I could do, being a rich American missionary, I had shotgun shells. If a bird was flying by the canoe, I would shoot it out of the air. And they thought that was the greatest thing. They just couldn't believe that I could shoot something out of the air. So that's the only thing I could do better than the Indians.
Travel marksman, ballistics
Well, yeah,
marksman.
because
good.
getting good at shooting a bird in the air takes a lot of practice, and that would be a lot of
A lot
shells.
of shells, and they wouldn't do that.
No, you got to go through boxes and boxes of 12 gauge to get to a point where you're reasonably proficient.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
So what do we have here? We've got another.
This is a skirt for a little girl, and our missionary ladies would bring in beads, or if they went into town, the nearest town, they could buy beads or trade for beads. And our girls would bring in beads and trade for fish or trade for meat or whatever, and would trade beads to them. And this is a Makiritare girl's skirt. She would tie this around her waist, and this would cover her front, basically. And this was her clothing. Before we would go into the tribe, we would, and every time we would go back from furlough in the United States, we'd bring back clothes with us.
Sure.
And then trade the clothes. You can buy T-shirts at Salvation Army for 25 cents.
Right.
It didn't matter what they said on them, what they looked like. And we would pack all our belongings with clothes as packing material,
Right.
and then trade them to the Indians for this, or, a yadiwadu. We would trade clothing for them because they love clothes, absolutely love clothes.
Do they prefer to barter as a rule?
It's really
a
their
thing for a
only
thing?
way of
Yeah.
it's their only way of existence is bartering.
So currency is really not a...
Not in the tribe. There is
I
no
see.
currency. Once in a while, tribal men will go. I'm only speaking from our small group. They would go downriver and they would hire themselves off for gold mining or diamond mining, because on the river system, the La Paragua River system, there were Brazilian miners coming down from Brazil looking for gold and looking for diamonds. It's a very, very difficult life. And they took their life into their own hands. They would be killed if they stepped out of line, or if they found gold and the Brazilian miner thought he didn't want to pay the Indians, he would kill the Indians. There's no law in the jungle. There's no law. There's no police, and there's no military. And so if they wanted to just hire an Indian for 2 weeks working on his barge, they would just kill him afterwards. And that happened to our group.
So it's
Our
expendable.
Indians. Yeah.
So was that the practice, the common practice, or was that...
I don't know if it's a common practice. I know that we lost guys that way
I see.
from our village.
Wow.
No accountability.
No, there is none. Yeah, there's no law.
So if you do... Is there any mechanism in society that's similar to what Gary does, whereas, he participates in legislation, actively making legislation? Is that whole concept sort of
Yeah, there's a whole.
absent?
There is a law. It's called the law of the jungle.
Well, we have
Once in
Spoken
a
like
row.
a man who
Once in a
knows.
row. Yeah, exactly.
He's been
we
to
had-
Concord. He knows
we
the
had
jungle.
the chief, and we had the witch doctor, and we
Okay.
had the captain of the village. And those three men were the government of the village, and they would say what goes. And you were living in fear of the witch doctor. And so there was that fear. You didn't want to be on his bad side, because any sickness, whatever, he could call down upon you. In their hearts and minds, this is what they believe.
Sure.
Wow.
In 2005, President Hugo Chavez kicked us out of the country. Did not, at first, he held up a paper and on national TV and said, I have proof that the missionaries with New Tribes Mission are CIA operatives. And so I've asked them to leave the country. So Jane and I and our fellow missionaries started planning and packing and moving back to the United States. Some of us have stayed there in different positions.
Right.
They work in the city rather than in the tribal locations. So we're waiting for the country to open back up.
So tell them what happened to the. Was it George Bush? One of our wonderful leaders back in the States actually gave credence to this assertion.
A Christian leader
Oh, okay.
in 2005 went on national TV. He was a popular TV evangelist, very well known. I'll withhold his name. I'm very upset with him, but I'll let that go.
Is there a possibility that he may at one time have run for president?
He said on national TV that President Hugo Chavez should be assassinated or taken out. And he was a Christian leader. So, of course, Hugo Chavez got this article and proclaimed to his government, see, even the Christians, the evangelicos, the
Evangelicals. Yeah.
evangelicals, are calling for my head. And it just proves that, that these people are not who they say they are. And so
Wow.
it made us all look really bad.
What was his agenda? What did he hope to accomplish with this lie?
I don't know what his motive was. But what I did know immediately was that we sensed a turning of the Venezuelan people against us.
Sure.
Because they started to believe these stories.
Sure.
And so those who were our friends started treating us, at arm's length, not knowing if we were CIA
Now, the people in
operatives.
the tribe wouldn't, because they have no idea.
Oh, no.
They have
The
no
people in the
clue.
tribe had no, they didn't know.
Right,
It
right,
was the people in the cities, our support network.
right, right,
They started
right.
looking
Exactly.
at us as being...
And you're there with your wife and kids, so it's not like you're there by yourself and, well, whatever.
That would have been one thing, but
Yeah.
I was there. And I wrote a letter immediately to him, this particular person. And I told him, I said, you just put my family's life in jeopardy. And I got a response immediately back saying that, hey, this is not what he meant. He didn't mean it to say it the way he came across. And that was the end of that. So
Yeah.
so that's why I'm here today, is we were kicked out of Venezuela.
And that was
Wow.
in 05. So
That was in
that's-
05.
That's
Yeah,
12
we
years ago.
Yeah, we returned to the United States in 06.
Yeah.
And since then, the Lord has, I came back wondering all the years of being in Venezuela and all the years of training and why am I back in the United States? And through the counsel of many, my pastor especially, my pastors of those days, 12 years ago, they said, Walt, continue doing what you've always done until God moves you again.
Right.
So I'm here now in New England doing evangelism and discipleship. I teach the Bible from beginning to end, starting in Genesis 1:1, called the chronological teaching that we learn through New Tribes Mission. I do prison ministry here in Massachusetts. I have a prison ministry going.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other facets of the ministry the Lord has me involved in. So, and it's amazing. I never wanted to go into a prison. I never wanted anything to do with a prison. In fact, I worked really hard as a young man to
stay out of them,
prison.
yeah.
But God opened the door in miraculous ways, and so I'm now teaching in a prison weekly, and I love it.
Okay,
Absolutely
so-
love it.
So we got the overview.
Mhm.
I asked you this. I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I'll ask you anyway because it's my show, right?
That's
Yeah,
right.
you can
That's
do what
right.
you can do what
That's
you want.
right.
I do what I want. I was listening. I
That's my best Ed McMahon response.
think that was really good. Ed McMahon, he was so cool.
You're correct, sir. Your show.
So I asked you this. I don't know if you want to say this on camera, but I'll ask anyway and see what happens. Because I always, like everybody else, I presume, any thinking person, you hear things on TV or in the news, and you want to believe it, but you're never quite sure. You never, because you don't know the person talking. And I heard a witch doctor from the Amazon talking about how before he was a Christian, he was in a village and a missionary came into the village and he ran away, and it took a long time because, like you said, breaking that language barrier takes a long time to overcome that. And I asked you, because what the witch doctor said once he came to Christ, when he asked the pastor, or the pastor asked him, "Why did you run out of town?" He's like you said, he's the most powerful guy in the village, and he booked it. And what the witch doctor explained to him was that when he came into town, what he didn't know was that there was a legion of angels behind him. And he was scared. He saw the angels with the pastor or the evangelist coming into the village, and it frightened him, and he took off. And so did you see evidence that they can see, like, in other words, if they're brought up in the jungle, maybe they do see things that we as materialistic Americans will never see?
Absolutely. They are very in tune with the spiritual world. I try to explain that to Americans, that we live in a spiritual world.
Right.
Most Americans think you're crazy when you talk about it. But we do. The Bible talks about it.
It's all over the place.
We live in a spiritual world. The witch doctors know many times before you ever come into the village that you're coming. When you talk about spirits, they already know who the spirit is. They'll say, which one is that? And they'll because they're named. I've heard story after story from missionaries firsthand of exactly what you just said, that missionaries have come into the village, they saw the power that is in you is far greater than the power that's in them, and it scares them to death. But we've also learned as missionaries, some of our first converts are the witch doctors.
Why?
Because they are so in tune with the spiritual world. They understand that the power that you have, that's in you, not you as a person, but the power of Jesus
the Holy
Christ,
Spirit.
the Holy Spirit in you. They understand how powerful He is, and they want that. They might not come to it in the right way, but they realize what you have is far greater than what they have. And they want to know about it, and they start asking you questions about the Spirit. Who is it that lives within you? What is His name? How do I invite Him into my life?
Wow.
It's
Is that
fascinating.
awesome?
Yeah.
And isn't it neat that you got to go somewhere far away and talk to people who have no prior knowledge of the contents of the gospel in order to confirm its truth
Spiritual world.
for those of us here who have heard it 100 times?
Yeah. It's amazing. And I felt that I wasn't even ready for it. When I went to Venezuela, I didn't expect to see people who were possessed. I didn't know what that looked like. In the United States, if somebody's possessed, they drug him up and they put him in a mental institution.
Yeah.
And he's so drugged up physically that he can't act out anymore. He's in a mental
He's
institution.
physically
He's
incapable
physically
of
incapable.
the demonic possession causing him to act out because his
Exactly.
body is no longer capable of reacting.
Exactly. But in Venezuela, they don't have the mental institutions. So the people are on the streets. And so when you're walking on the sidewalk and you all of a sudden come up on a man or a woman that is totally naked and they're beating themselves with a stick and crying out and screaming, that's not a mental illness. That's demon possession.
Right.
And it's scary. I mean, you don't know what to do. You know, we didn't grow up with learning about this. I came from a very conservative Christian background, and we didn't talk a lot about the demons, the demon world. And
Right.
so, you know, going there was scary for me.
Did you ever did you ever get to the point where you could start sensing it yourself? Not
Absolutely. And I sense it now. I'm so much more sensitive to the spirits moving now than I've ever been. And I sit back because I have the beauty of having lived overseas for so many years that I come back into my own language and culture, and I have an opportunity to, I believe, to properly analyze situations and say, oh, this is not a good situation. I work like I say, I teach in the prison. And there's many times that I've said to the pastor there, the chaplain, Dave Renner, a very good friend of mine, who has given me permission to come in, I've said to him that this situation isn't right. This guy isn't right. It's because of the spirit world.
Right, right.
And he recognizes it. But being in the prison system.
Yeah, we can be oblivious to it, but we can see signs of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't feel it. We've tuned it out. I think I think it's
And
basically
we don't
like
want to be looked at as being,
Loopy.
loopy or religious, Or,
yeah, exactly. Which is
oh, you see demons around every corner, or, you're one of them, I
But
don't
these
care anymore.
sensitivities equip you to be a stronger intercessory prayer warrior.
I believe
because
so.
it's directed prayer.
Yeah.
You have some intel.
And it makes you have more mercy and grace for people, too.
Uh-huh.
See, that's the one thing I think I'm growing in the most is my mercy for others and grace for others. Because people are struggling, they're carrying around their own baggage. I have no idea what you've been through in life, or you. And so I come and I meet you firsthand, face to face.
silver spoon, really.
I don't know. And so God has called me to be merciful and grace and show grace to you. I don't know you. You could be the girl at the local store, cashier, and she's did you find everything today? And she's throwing your stuff across the bleeper, and you just stop and say, no, I didn't find everything, and she doesn't even hear you. She just keeps
No.
right.
Yeah.
And you say, and you look at her pin, and you see her name, and you say, "Hi, Janice. You've been here 2 years. How can you make it here in 2 years?" Crack a joke, and all of a sudden she becomes a real person.
Sure.
You have no idea that her husband is dying of leukemia at home,
Right.
and the struggles that she's going through. And I think that's what I'm growing in, is grace and mercy, not in judgment, but just to be graceful to people.
Yeah, because like you say, you don't know, what practical things they're going through, or but also the spiritual things people are going through is amazing. And I think that's one of the things I really love about Jesus Christ is that if when you read the Bible, you get this beautiful sense that when he came across people that were suffering, and people that were struggling, and people who were trying to were fighting the fight, he was very patient.
Yep.
Like, in other words, he would be, Christ, I presume, was almost, could see exactly what that witch doctor could see times 10, but also had the authority with him to get rid of it. And he would see people demonically possessed or people that were struggling and have all kinds of love and affection for them and patience. The only people he seemed to have almost zero patience for were the people that should know better,
The hypocrites.
the hypocrites.
Yep.
And the hypocrites today are the Christians,
Many of them.
Well, a lot of them.
right? Because we're the
We are.
ones.
I am.
Well, I know we all are to a point, but I'm saying the Christians are the ones who read the Bible and should be setting an example
Exactly.
for everybody around them
Absolutely.
and loving everybody around them. But we don't.
It's a process of growth. I used to be really hard, and you can talk to my wife about that. I was very judgmental, especially when I got out of Bible school. I knew everything. I could fix every problem.
How old were you?
When I got out of Bible college, I was like 30,
Okay,
29.
okay. Yeah, that's a
And
good age to be.
I had three babies, and 3 children, and a wife, and pregnant wife, and I knew everything back then. I could fix every problem. I'll just throw a Bible verse at you, but I was hard. I was cold, and thinking that I was going to fix the world. And God has had to chip away and polish my hard sides to make me caring for others.
That's not a very pleasant process
It's
at
not.
times.
It's hard.
No?
It's hard.
Sometimes humility has to be visited upon you to remind you
Yeah, exactly. The discipline. Yeah.
of who you really are.
Yeah.
There is a scripture verse that you're explaining this attitude of renewed patience and mercy. It comes to mind, and that's a kind word turns away wrath. I can't remember. I'm paraphrasing, and I can't remember where in scripture it is, but I know it's there. And this is kind of an extension of that idea, it sounds to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Of learning grace and for others. And like I said, being in the prison system, working with these, teaching these guys, they're in a tough situation. I used to be hard thinking that, okay, get out of prison, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps,
Suck it up.
get a job like the rest of us, and pay in your taxes and be a productive member in a society. But then after visiting with these guys and learning that when they get out after 5 years or 8 years,
They can't find a job.
they can't get work, they don't have a car, they don't have license, they don't have any money, nothing. They're given a ticket to get on the metro from Concord to Boston.
Yeah.
They get off the train, they have no place to go. They have nothing. And that's the way our state rehabilitates people. I have a story of one particular gentleman in my Bible study. He got off the train, he went into a local coffee shop. He said, "This is a holdup, give me your money, give me a coffee and a donut." And she said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yep." And he sat down in a chair and just waited for the cops to show up. They came, they arrested him, brought him back to jail.
he was institutionalized.
Yeah. He says, "I have 3 hots and a cot." These guys have nothing. So what did that do to me? It softened me so that I have more grace and mercy for these people who are getting out of the facilities. They have nothing. They burnt their bridges, and people say, good enough for them, they deserve it. you know what? A lot of us deserve. You know, I had a gentleman say to me, Walter, the only difference between you and me is I got caught. There's truth in that.
Yeah.
Mercy is not getting what you deserve.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Or is it the other way around?
we only have a couple seconds, but it's
Well,
like,
you talk about the book?
oh, yeah, before we run out of time completely. You got a book?
Well, this is one of the books that I teach. It's called The Stranger on the Road to Emmaus. And what this is a chronological Bible study.
You should
It's-
hold that up.
It starts up this way.
Yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah.
It starts in Genesis 1:1 and walks you through the Bible till you get to the cross.
Sure.
So you understand why
Why you get to the cross.
you get to the cross. Because many people talk about Jesus dying on the cross for their sins, but they don't understand why he had to die on the cross. Why his blood had to be spilled. Why no bone was broken in his body. Why did he wear a crown of thorns? What was the purpose of that? Why was he hung on a tree? People just say, oh, he was crucified and he died for my sins. But there's a lot more to the story.
Right.
And it starts in the book of Genesis. And I just figured if you've never read this book or you're looking for a good study, we teach the Indians chronologically. We start in Genesis 1:1, and we start teaching the Indians chronologically through the Bible. We don't jump right into the story of Jesus. That takes years before we ever get to Christ, so that they have a good foundation of who God is before they ever get to his Son. Then when we reveal who his Son is, the lights come on, and they can trust him as their sacrifice for their sins.
Wow.
I don't know if we have time for a miracle story, but
How much?
probably about 2
We got
minutes.
a minute.
A minute. Miracle
Give it
story.
a go.
I was teaching in Concord, August 11th, 2011, at the prison. And I was going through a very difficult time trying to learn about the Holy Spirit working in the church. And I was going from, in this book, I was going from the crucifixion to the planting of the church in the book of Acts. And I was telling the guys, I'm the last one to be standing in front of you to teach about the Holy Spirit. Because personally, I don't know that I know him personally. I can visualize the Father, I can visualize the Son. But the Holy Spirit, I could never visualize in my life. And I right at that moment, as I was telling them this, I was saying, remember when Christ died on the cross for the sins of the world? I said, what happened? The temple curtain was torn from top to bottom. The sky grew dark, and the earth shook. And at that moment, the Spirit of God that left the temple made with man's hand came to live within the hearts of mankind. The moment I said that, the whole prison started shaking. There was over 100 men in the prison, the pastor, and everything started shaking. The pews started shaking, and all I was thinking was, this is going to hurt, because it was all concrete above me.
Right.
And I'm thinking, this is going to hurt. And I'm looking up at the ceiling, wondering if it's going to come down on me. And the pews are shaking, and the pastor was in the back, Pastor Dave Runner. He was a riot. He said he was holding his Bible. He says, I thought I was having a stroke because I couldn't hold my Bible straight. And it was an earthquake. But because the chapel is below ground there, we felt it very strongly.
I see.
And it was just like the earthquake when Christ died.
It was incredible.
That's awesome. Hey, we only got like a half a second.
Yep.
Walter, thank you very much for coming way up
Thank
north.
you for having me.
You're awesome, and I hope that helps somebody out there.
You heard it.
See you next week.
Heard it from the horse's mouth.